The dinner plates clinked as Victoria arranged them perfectly on the dining table. One for James, one for Emma, one for Michael, one for herself. My heart sank as I realized once again there wasn't a place set for me. "Eleanor," Victoria called. Out, her voice sweet as honey but sharp as a razor beneath. "Would you mind eating in the kitchen tonight? We're having the Hendersons over later, and I need to make sure everything looks just right." As my son James avoided my eyes, I quietly retreated to the kitchen with my plate of food that had already gone cold. 5 years I'd lived with them, since my husband passed. 5 years of gradually being pushed to the margins of my own family. But that night, after discovering what was hidden in my late husband's workshop, I finally found the courage to speak my truth. The words I said made Victoria leave not just the dinner table, but the house entirely, and nothing in our family would ever be the same again. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Eleanor Patterson, though everyone has called me Ellie since I was a little girl. At 72, I'd seen enough of life to know when someone was trying to erase me. The signs were subtle at first. Victoria rearranging family photos, so mine were hidden behind larger frames, conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. Holiday traditions I'd created slowly replaced with Victoria's ideas of how things should be done. After my Richard passed away, our modest 2-bedroom house in Pine Valley felt too quiet, too empty. When James suggested I sell my home and move in with them in Oakwood Heights, it seemed like the right decision. "Mom, we've got plenty of room," he'd said. "Emma and Michael would love having you around, and you shouldn't be alone right now." The house on Cedar Avenue was certainly impressive. 3 stories of modern architecture with floor-to-ceiling windows and a manicured lawn that never seemed to grow a weed. Victoria had been an interior designer before she married James, and every inch of the home reflected her meticulous taste. Nothing was ever out of place, including me, once I arrived with my 2 suitcases and a heart full of grief. The first few weeks were a blur of adjustment. Victoria showed me to the guest room on the ground floor. "So you won't have to manage the stairs, Eleanor," and helped me arrange my belongings. I noticed she'd already removed most of the decorative items that had been there before, leaving the walls bare except for a generic landscape painting. "You can make it your own," she said, though her tone suggested the opposite. Within reason, of course. The wallpaper was just redone last year. I placed a photo of Richard and me on the nightstand, our 40th anniversary, both of us laughing as we cut the cake. It was the only personal touch I allowed myself in those early days. Everything else stayed packed away in boxes that were quickly relegated to a corner of the garage. My son James worked long hours at his investment firm, often leaving before dawn and returning well after dinner. Victoria managed the household with precision, planning meals and activities weeks in advance. My grandchildren, Emma and Michael, were wrapped up in their own lives, Emma with college and her boyfriend, Michael with sports and preparing for graduation. At first, they seemed happy to have me around, stopping by my room to chat or asking for help with assignments. But as months passed, their visits grew less frequent. "They're just busy, Mom," James would say whenever I mentioned it. "You remember how it is at that age." Mealtimes became the clearest indicator of my status in the house. Initially, we all ate together at the long dining table, though Victoria controlled the seating arrangement with her place cards. Mine was always at the far end, away from James and the kids. Then came the special occasions, when business associates or Victoria's friends were invited, and I was asked to eat earlier or in the kitchen. "It's just easier this way, Eleanor," Victoria would explain with a practiced smile. "You understand." Soon, these special occasions became more frequent, until I was taking most of my meals alone at the small table in the kitchen corner, listening to the laughter and conversation from the dining room where my family sat together without me. I spent my days trying to make myself useful. I offered to help with cooking, but Victoria insisted she had her special recipes and methods. I suggested assisting with the gardening, but was told the landscapers had strict instructions. Even offering to drive Michael to his practices was dismissed. He has his license now, Eleanor, and needs the responsibility. The community center became my refuge. 3 days a week, I volunteered at their reading program, helping children with literacy. I made a few friends there, particularly Sarah Cooper, who lived a few blocks away with her husband Daniel. "Why don't you ever invite us to your son's place?" Sarah asked once over coffee. "I'd love to meet your family." I changed the subject, unwilling to admit that I hadn't been allowed to invite friends over. Victoria was clear about guests. They were to be approved by her first, and somehow my suggestions never quite made the cut. My world grew smaller with each passing month. I started taking long walks around the neighborhood, just to escape the silence of my room. The local library became another sanctuary, where I could lose myself in books and conversations with the librarians who came to know me by name. It was during one of these walks, about 3 years into my stay, that I first heard Victoria speaking about me to her friend Olivia, the real estate agent. They were sitting on the back patio, voices carrying over the fence as I approached the house from my daily walk. "It's just not what we expected," Victoria was saying. "She's always there, watching, commenting. James doesn't see it, but she undermines me with the kids. And the house. It's like having a perpetual guest who never leaves." "What about assisted living?" Olivia suggested. "There are some beautiful communities nearby." "James won't hear of it," Victoria sighed. "Family loyalty and all that." But honestly, we had plans before she moved in. Travel, remodeling the upstairs. Now everything's on hold indefinitely. I froze on the sidewalk, my chest tightening. Is that how they saw me? As an unwanted burden blocking their plans? I quietly circled the block twice more before entering through the front door, making enough noise so they'd know I was home. That night, I looked up apartments online, researching what my modest savings and Richard's pension might afford. The results were disheartening. Everything in Oakwood Heights was far beyond my means, and moving elsewhere would mean seeing even less of my grandchildren. When James noticed me lingering at the computer, I quickly closed the browser. "Everything okay, Mom?" he asked, rare concern in his voice. "Just looking up a book I heard about," I lied, not wanting to burden him with my troubles. Another year passed this way, with Victoria's subtle digs growing more frequent and my isolation more complete. My room became both sanctuary and prison, the one space where I could exist without being in the way. I arranged my handful of treasured possessions carefully. Richard's watch on the dresser, our wedding album beside it, the small watercolor my granddaughter Emma had painted for me years ago. The worst moments were the family celebrations. For Michael's 17th birthday, Victoria organized an elaborate party with dozens of guests. I spent the morning helping with preparations, only to be asked to handle the gift table in the used side room, effectively removed from the festivities. At Thanksgiving, my traditional cranberry recipe, the one Richard had loved, was replaced without discussion. At Christmas, the ornaments I'd collected over decades remained boxed in the garage, while Victoria decorated with matching gold and white baubles that complemented her color scheme. "Don't you think we should include some of Mom's decorations?" James asked once, a rare moment of awareness. "Oh, but they're so dated, honey," Victoria replied. "And they don't match our theme this year." That was my son's pattern, occasional moments of seeing me, followed by immediate surrender to his wife's preferences. I couldn't blame him entirely. He worked hard to provide the lifestyle Victoria expected, and peace at home made his demanding job more bearable. Still, each time he failed to stand up for me, a little piece of my heart crumbled away. By the 5th year, I had accepted my place, or lack of one, in the household. I spoke less at the increasingly rare family meals, stopped, suggesting activities with my grandchildren, and kept my opinions to myself. I had become exactly what Victoria wanted: invisible. Then came the evening that changed everything. It was early spring, and Victoria was hosting a dinner for James's colleagues and their spouses. The house had been in a flurry of preparation. For days, professional cleaners, fresh flowers delivered, special wines selected. I had stayed out of the way, spending extra hours at the community center and taking long detours on my walks home. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. When I finally returned that afternoon, Victoria was directing the caterers in the kitchen. "Eleanor," she said when she spotted me, "there you are. We're having 14 for dinner tonight. The Richardsons, the Blakes, the Andersons, and the new partners from the Boston office. Very important for James's promotion." I nodded, already anticipating what was coming. "I've set up a tray in your room," she continued, not meeting my eyes. "The salmon is for the guests, but I've had them prepare a chicken breast for you. I hope that's suitable." "I can eat in the kitchen," I offered, knowing how this script played out. "I won't be in the way." Victoria looked relieved. "That would be perfect. Around 6, perhaps? The guests arrive at 7 and we'll need the kitchen clear by then." I retreated to my room to change, my appetite already gone. As I sat on the edge of my bed, I noticed dust gathering on Richard's watch. With nothing else to occupy my time, I decided to clean it properly. The toolbox I needed was in the garage, in a workshop area Richard had set up years ago when we still lived in our own home. James had moved all of Richard's tools here after I sold the house, promising I could access them any time. In reality, I rarely went there, the memories too painful in those early days. The garage was quiet and cool as I made my way past James's luxury sedan and Victoria's pristine SUV. The workshop occupied the far corner, a small area cordoned off with pegboards and shelving. Everything was covered in a fine layer of dust. Clearly, no one had touched these tools since they were placed here. I found the small precision screwdriver set in a red metal box, right where Richard always kept it. As I pulled it from the shelf, something behind it caught my eye. A leather-bound ledger I didn't recognize. Curious, I set down the tools and reached for it. The cover was worn but well cared for, with my husband's initials embossed in the bottom corner. Inside, page after page of Richard's neat handwriting, documented investments, withdrawals, and notes spanning more than 20 years. I sat on the old workshop stool, completely absorbed. Richard had been a careful man with money, frugal even, but as I turned the pages, I realized there was much he hadn't shared with me. Property investments in 3 states, stock portfolios I'd never known about, a trust fund established for Emma and Michael that had been steadily growing since their births. And then, on the final pages, a letter addressed to me. "My dearest Ellie," it began, "if you're reading this, I'm no longer with you, and for that, I'm deeply sorry. There are matters I should have discussed with you while I could, but I wanted to protect you from worry. Now, it's time you knew everything." The letter explained how Richard had quietly built a substantial nest egg over the years through shrewd investments and careful saving. He detailed accounts and safety deposit boxes I knew nothing about, providing access information for each. The final paragraph left me breathless. "All of this is yours now, Ellie. Not James's, not anyone else's. Yours to use as you see fit. You've given your heart and soul to our family for 50 years. Now it's time to live for yourself. Our love has been my greatest fortune. I hope what I've left behind gives you the freedom to find joy again." I sat motionless, the ledger heavy in my hands. According to Richard's meticulous records, I wasn't a financial burden who needed to be tolerated. I was a wealthy woman. Behind the ledger, I found a sealed envelope with the contact information for Thomas Bennett, a lawyer in Oakwood Heights I'd never heard of. Inside was another note from Richard. Tom has all the paperwork ready. He's waiting for your call. My hands trembled as I replaced everything except the ledger, which I slipped into my sweater pocket. I needed time to think, to process what this meant. For 5 years, I'd believed I had no choice but to accept my diminished place in my son's home. Now, suddenly, I had options. Back in my room, I hid the ledger beneath my mattress and changed. For dinner, my mind racing. Before I could decide what to do next, Victoria knocked on my door. "Eleanor, your dinner is in the kitchen. Please try to finish up before the caterers need the space again." I nodded absently, my thoughts still swirling with Richard's revelations. As I made my way to the kitchen, I passed James in the hallway, already dressed in his best suit. "Hey, Mom," he said, adjusting his tie. "Everything okay? You look a little flushed." For a moment, I considered telling him everything right then. Instead, I simply smiled. "I'm fine, dear. Just a little tired from my walk today." "Well, get some rest after dinner. Maybe stay in your room tonight? Victoria's really nervous about impressing the new partners." The familiar sting of exclusion hit, but it felt different now. This wasn't my only option anymore. "I understand," I said quietly. "Good luck tonight." In the kitchen, a plate sat waiting at the small table tucked in the corner. The chicken breast was dry, the vegetables overcooked, clearly not prepared, with the same care as the meal for the dinner guests. I ate mechanically, barely tasting anything, while the caterers bustled around me, sometimes reaching over my head for supplies as if I weren't there. Through the swinging door, I could see Victoria directing the setup in the dining room. The table was exquisite, her best china, crystal glasses catching the light, fresh flower arrangements creating the perfect ambiance. Places were set for 14 people, each with a handwritten place card. The family portrait on the wall behind, the head of the table showed James, Victoria, Emma, and Michael, a picture taken during a vacation I hadn't been invited to join. My entire existence had been neatly erased from the visual narrative of this family. Even Emma and Michael, who had once delighted in visiting their grandmother, had been taught that I was somehow separate, less important, an afterthought. As I finished my meal, Victoria swept into the kitchen in her designer dress, looking annoyed to find me still there. "Eleanor, the guests will be arriving any minute. Could you please clear your things and—" She stopped mid-sentence as the front door opened and voices filled the entryway. The guests were early. "Just go to your room quickly," she whispered urgently. "Use the back hallway so they don't see you." Something in me finally broke. 5 years of swallowed words, of shrinking myself to fit into smaller and smaller spaces, of watching my grandchildren being taught that I was somehow less worthy of respect and inclusion. It all crystallized into a moment of absolute clarity. "No," I said quietly, standing up from the little table. "I don't think I will." Victoria's eyes widened. "What?" I said, "No, Victoria. I won't be hidden away tonight." James appeared in the kitchen doorway, confusion clouding his features. "Is everything okay? The Richardsons just arrived." Victoria shot me a warning look before turning to my son with a forced smile. "Everything's fine, honey. Your mother was just heading to her room." "Actually," I said, my voice growing stronger, "I think I'll join you all for dinner tonight." A moment of stunned silence followed. James looked between his wife and me, clearly unsure how to navigate this unprecedented rebellion. Victoria's perfect hostess mask slipped for just a second, revealing the cold calculation beneath. "Don't be silly, Eleanor," she said with a tight laugh. "We've already set the table for 14. There's no room." I smiled, feeling a strange calm settle over me. "There's always room for family, Victoria. Unless, of course, you don't consider me family." James stepped forward, finally finding his voice. "Mom, of course you're family. It's just that tonight is important for my career, and we've planned everything very carefully." Yes, I replied, looking directly at him. Victoria has been planning very carefully for 5 years, planning me right out of this family. The uncomfortable silence that followed was broken by more voices in the hallway. The remaining guests had arrived, and Victoria was caught in her worst nightmare, a disruption to her perfect evening. Her eyes darted between me and the dining room, calculating her next move. I could have backed down then. It would have been easier, more comfortable to retreat once again to my room and maintain the peace. But Richard's words echoed in my mind. It's time to live for yourself. Instead, I smoothed down my simple dress and walked past them both, straight into the dining room where the guests were gathering. I heard Victoria's sharp intake of breath behind me, but I didn't turn around. "Good evening," I said to the startled Azes. "I'm Eleanor Patterson, James's mother. I don't believe we've met before." The next few minutes were a blur of introductions and pleasantries. Victoria appeared at my side, her smile fixed but her eyes furious. "Eleanor was just stopping by to say hello," she said, attempting to guide me toward the hallway. "She has plans this evening." I stood my ground. Actually, my plans changed. I thought I'd join my family for dinner. One of the partners, an older gentleman with kind eyes, immediately offered, "We'd be delighted to have you join us, Mrs. Patterson." Victoria's grip on my arm tightened slightly. "That's very kind, but we've already arranged the seating and—" "Oh, I'm sure we can squeeze in one more chair," he insisted. "Family is everything, after all." James appeared with an extra chair, looking both concerned and slightly impressed by my unexpected assertiveness. As the group moved toward the table, Victoria pulled me aside, her voice a harsh whisper. "What do you think you're doing? This is completely inappropriate." I met her gaze steadily. "What's inappropriate is how you've treated me for 5 years, Victoria. Making me eat alone, excluding me from family events, gradually erasing me from my son's and grandchildren's lives." Her face flushed. "You're being ridiculous. We gave you a home when you had nowhere else to go." And that's when I said the line that changed everything. The truth I'd discovered just hours before. "I've always had somewhere to go, Victoria. Richard left me more than enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life. I stayed because I wanted to be near my family. But it seems I don't have a family here anymore. Just people who tolerate me until they can find a polite way to make me disappear." The color drained from her face. "What are you talking about?" "The investments, the properties, the accounts. Richard documented everything. I found his ledger today. I'm not dependent on your charity, Victoria. I never was." She stared at me in shock, all pretense gone. "You're lying. James handles all the family finances. He would know if—" "Richard kept certain matters private," I interrupted. "He wanted to make sure I was taken care of, no matter what. And tomorrow, I'll be meeting with his lawyer to claim what's mine." For the first time in 5 years, I saw genuine fear in Victoria's eyes. Her careful plans, whatever they might have been, were suddenly in jeopardy. Her gaze darted to the dining room, where guests were taking their seats, then back to me. "We'll discuss this later," she said, her voice unsteady. "Right now, we have guests." "Yes," I agreed. "We do, and I'll be joining them." The dinner that followed was tense beneath the surface pleasantries. Victoria barely touched her food, her perfect hostess persona requiring increasingly evident effort. James kept glancing between us, sensing the shift in power, but not understanding its source. The guests remained blissfully unaware of the domestic drama unfolding alongside the gourmet salmon. I participated in the conversation, sharing stories about James's childhood that made his colleagues laugh. I asked thoughtful questions about their work and families. I was, in short, the perfect dinner guest, exactly what Victoria had prevented me from being for 5 long years. As coffee was served, Victoria abruptly excused herself, citing a sudden headache. James followed her concerned while I continued, chatting with the guests. When he returned alone several minutes later, his expression was troubled. "Victoria isn't feeling well," he announced. "She's asked to be excused for the remainder of the evening." The dinner concluded soon after, with guests expressing their thanks and concern for Victoria's well-being. Once the last car had pulled away from the curb, James turned to me in the empty dining room. "What happened between you and Victoria, Mom?" "She's upstairs packing a bag, saying she needs to stay with her sister tonight." I sighed, suddenly feeling every one of my 72 years. "It's a long story, James, but it's time we talked, really talked, about the past 5 years, and about your father's legacy." As we sat down in the living room, the ledger heavy in my hands, I knew this was just the beginning. Victoria might have left for the night, but the conversation we needed to have was long overdue. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain: I would never eat alone in the kitchen again. James and I sat in the living room long after the guests had departed. The house felt different somehow. The air itself seemed to have shifted. Through the large windows, I could see the streetlights casting soft pools of light along Cedar Avenue, each home appearing peaceful from the outside. How many other houses, I wondered, held similar quiet battles behind their perfect facades? "Start from the beginning, Mom," James said, his tie loosened and jacket discarded. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes more pronounced than I'd noticed before. When had my boy grown so weary? I opened Richard's ledger carefully, as if the pages might crumble under my touch. "Your father was always planning ahead," I began, my voice soft with memory. "Remember how he used to say, 'Hope for the best, prepare for the worst'?" James nodded, a small smile flickering across his face. "He made me keep emergency kits in every car. What you didn't know, what I didn't know until today, was that he'd been preparing financially our entire marriage." I turned the ledger toward him, pointing to the earliest entries. It started small. Investments here and there, properties, purchased at auction, stocks that he researched meticulously. James leaned forward, his brow furrowed as he scanned the neat columns of figures. "I had no idea," he murmured. "Dad always seemed so ordinary about money." "That was deliberate," I explained. "Your father grew up with nothing. His own father lost everything in bad investments. Richard was determined not to make the same mistakes." As James flipped through the pages, his expression shifted from confusion to astonishment. "Mom, if these figures are accurate—" "They are," I confirmed. "I verified several accounts this afternoon from my room, using the information he left. There's a safety deposit box at First National with all the official documents." James ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father that my heart ached. "But why keep this secret, even from you?" I sighed, remembering Richard's familiar determined expression whenever money discussions arose. He didn't want me to worry, and he didn't want his success to change how we lived. We were happy with our simple life. And I think— I paused, considering my next words carefully. "I think he wanted to be sure I would be truly secure if anything happened to him. No one could take advantage if they didn't know what existed." "Take advantage?" James looked up sharply. "Who would take advantage of you?" The question hung in the air between us. I met my son's gaze, seeing the genuine confusion there. Had he truly been blind to what had been happening in his own home? "James," I said gently, "I've been living in your house for 5 years. In that time, I've been gradually moved from the family dining table to eating alone in the kitchen. I've been excluded from holidays, asked to stay in my room during gatherings, made to feel like an unwelcome guest rather than family." He had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Victoria just likes things a certain way," She has methodically removed me from family photos, discouraged Emma and Michael from spending time with me, and made it clear to everyone that I'm tolerated. Not welcomed, I continued, my voice remaining steady despite the hurt behind the words. And you, James, have allowed it to happen. My son flinched as if I'd struck him. For a long moment he said nothing, his eyes fixed on the ledger before him. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. I didn't realize it had gotten so bad. I thought you were comfortable, that this arrangement was working. Working for whom? I asked simply. Another long silence stretched between us. Outside, a car drove past, its headlights briefly illuminating the room before darkness settled again. Victoria wasn't always like this, James finally said, almost to himself. When we first met, she was warm, engaging. She loved hearing stories about my childhood, about you and Dad. I nodded, remembering the charming woman who had first entered our lives 15 years ago. People change, or perhaps they reveal who they truly are over time. What are you going to do now? James asked, looking up at me. With the money, I mean. First, I'm going to meet with Thomas Bennett, your father's lawyer, tomorrow. Then, I paused, realizing I hadn't fully thought beyond the immediate next steps. The possibilities stretching before me were both exhilarating and terrifying. Then I'm going to find a place of my own. You're leaving? The alarm in James's voice was genuine. Mom, you don't have to go. We can figure this out. I'll talk to Victoria, make her understand. I reached across and took his hand, noticing how much it resembled Richard's. Strong, capable, but with an artist's long fingers. James, it's time. I've stayed because I thought I had no choice financially, and because I wanted to be near you and the children. But Emma's in college now. Michael will leave for university next year, and you. I squeezed his hand gently. You have your own life to live, and now it seems so do I. Is this because of tonight? Because if it is, it's because of 5 years of nights, I interrupted softly. Tonight was just the moment I finally found my voice again. We talked until well past midnight, James asking questions about his father's investments, me sharing stories of small moments from our marriage that suddenly made sense in light of what I'd discovered. When Victoria hadn't returned by the time we said goodnight, I wondered if she would come back at all. The next morning, I rose early, a strange energy propelling me despite the late night. The house was quiet, James presumably still asleep upstairs. I made myself a cup of tea and carried it out to the back patio, watching as the rising sun painted the neat garden in shades of gold. Victoria's prized roses were beginning to bloom along the fence line, each bud perfectly formed and awaiting its moment to open. I had just finished my tea when I heard the front door open and close. Footsteps moved through the house, pausing briefly before continuing toward the patio. I turned, expecting James, but found Michael standing in the doorway instead, his school backpack slung over one shoulder. "Grandma?" he said, looking surprised to find me outside. "You're up early." "So are you," I observed, patting the chair beside me. "School doesn't start for another 2 hours." He hesitated, then dropped his backpack and joined me. At 18, he had grown into a handsome young man, with Richard's thoughtful eyes and steady presence. Of my 2 grandchildren, Michael had maintained the closest connection to me, occasionally stopping by my room to share a new music discovery or ask for help with a history assignment. "I was going to meet some friends for breakfast before class," he explained. "Study group for finals." I nodded, noticing the dark circles under his eyes. "You look tired, sweetheart. Are you sleeping enough?" Michael shrugged, a gesture that encompassed all the unspoken complexities of teenage life. "It's fine. Just a lot going on." He glanced toward the house. "Dad told me Victoria didn't come home last night." "No, she didn't," I confirmed, wondering how much James had shared with him. Because of what happened at dinner? I sighed, realizing news traveled quickly even within the privacy of family walls. Partly. We had a disagreement. Michael picked at a loose thread on his jeans, not meeting my eyes. I heard you talking with Dad last night. About Grandpa's money and about how things have been for you here. A pang of regret shot through me. I hadn't intended for my grandchildren to be caught in the middle of this situation. I'm sorry you overheard that. Michael, don't be. He looked up, his expression earnest. I've seen how Mom treats you. We all have. Emma and I talk about it sometimes, but we never knew what to do. The simple acknowledgement nearly undid me. All this time, I'd thought I was invisible, but at least my grandchildren had seen me. You shouldn't have had to do anything, I told him gently. It wasn't your responsibility to fix. But it wasn't right, he insisted, a flash of anger crossing his features. The way she would make you eat alone, or tell us you were too tired for family game night when you weren't, or how she threw away the Christmas ornaments you brought. I blinked in surprise. She threw them away? Michael nodded grimly. Last year. She told Dad they were damaged in storage, but I saw her putting them in the trash. I saved a few, the ones I remembered from when we used to visit your house. They're in my closet. The thought of Michael secretly rescuing those small pieces of our family history brought tears to my eyes. Thank you, I whispered. He shifted uncomfortably under my grateful gaze. I should have done more. Said something. No, I said firmly. You were a child in an adult situation, but I appreciate that you noticed, that you cared. We sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, watching as the garden came fully into the morning light. Finally, Michael spoke again, his voice hesitant. Grandma, are you really rich now? A small laugh escaped me. Not rich in the way people think of today, but comfortable, yes. Your grandfather made sure of it. Are you going to move out? The direct question caught me off guard. I'm thinking about it. Would that bother you? Michael considered this, his young face serious. I want you to be happy, if that means not living here. He trailed off, then added, but I'd miss you. I reached over and squeezed his hand. I'd miss you too, but I wouldn't be far, and you could visit any time. No more asking permission or scheduling around other people's plans. The idea seemed to appeal to him. You could get a place with a game room and a decent kitchen where you could actually cook again. I could, I agreed, warmed by his enthusiasm. And maybe a spare room for when you or Emma want to stay over. Michael nodded, then checked his watch and stood reluctantly. I should go. The guys are waiting. He hesitated, then bent down and gave me a quick, awkward hug. Love you, Grandma. Love you too, I replied, treasuring the rare physical affection from my nearly grown grandson. After he left, I remained on the patio, contemplating the conversation. Michael's perspective had solidified my resolve. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about breaking a cycle before my grandchildren accepted it as normal. At precisely 10 o'clock, I took a taxi to the offices of Bennett and Associates, located in a well-maintained building near the center of Oakwood Heights. The receptionist, a young woman with a kind smile, immediately showed me to Thomas Bennett's office when I gave my name. Mrs. Patterson, the lawyer greeted me, rising from behind his desk. He was older than I'd expected, probably in his mid-60s, with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses. I've been waiting for your call for quite some time. You knew my husband, I said. Not a question but a realization as I noticed the framed photo on his bookshelf, a much younger Thomas and Richard standing beside a fishing boat, both grinning widely. Since college, he confirmed, gesturing, for me to take a seat. Richard was my oldest friend. He made me promise to look after you when the time came. I placed Richard's ledger on the desk between us. I found this yesterday. Thomas nodded, not surprised. He told me where he left it. He thought you might need some time before you were ready to discover it. 5 years, I said quietly. It took me 5 years. Grief moves at its own pace, Thomas replied gently. Richard understood that. Now, shall we discuss what happens next? For the next 2 hours, Thomas walked me through everything Richard had arranged. There were 3 properties. A small apartment building in Pine Valley that generated steady rental income, a lakeside cabin in the mountains that Richard and his brother had purchased together decades ago, and a condominium in Oakwood Heights, itself just 10 blocks from James's house. The condo has been maintained by a management company, Thomas explained. It's furnished, but minimally. Richard thought you might want to decorate it yourself. A place that was just mine, I murmured, understanding my husband's intention. Even in death, he had been trying to give me freedom. Beyond the properties, there were investment accounts, retirement funds, and insurance policies that, when combined, provided a substantial monthly income, not extravagant wealth, but more than enough for me to live comfortably for the rest of my life. Why didn't he tell me? I asked finally, overwhelmed by the scope of what Richard had created. We were married for nearly 50 years. We shared everything. Thomas removed his glasses, polishing them thoughtfully before answering. Richard grew up watching his mother struggle after his father's death. The lack of preparation, the financial insecurity, it affected him deeply. He was determined you would never face that uncertainty. But the secrecy was his way of protecting you, Thomas finished. He didn't want you to worry about money during his lifetime, and he wanted to be absolutely certain everything was properly arranged before he shared it with you. He replaced his glasses, his expression softening. Also, Richard enjoyed the planning. He used to come in here with new investment ideas, mapping out how they would benefit you years down the road. It gave him enormous satisfaction. The image of Richard secretly working to secure my future touched something deep within me. It was so like him, practical, thoughtful, always looking ahead while remaining firmly anchored in the present we shared. What do I need to do now? I asked, bringing my focus back to the immediate situation. Thomas slid several folders across the desk. Review these documents, sign where indicated. The condo is ready whenever you are. I have the keys. Here, the management company can arrange for additional furnishings if you provide a list. I accepted the folders, my fingers tracing Richard's name on the top document. I'd like to see the condo today, if possible. Of course. Thomas wrote an address on a business card and handed it to me. I can meet you there at 2 o'clock if that works for you. I nodded, suddenly eager to see this space my husband had prepared for me. That would be perfect. As I gathered my things to leave, Thomas added, "There's one more thing, Eleanor. Richard left a letter for you in the safe deposit box. I can arrange for you to access it tomorrow." "Thank you," I said, my heart racing at the thought of one final message from Richard. "For everything. I promised Richard I'd help you transition into this new chapter," Thomas replied, walking me to the door. "And I intend to keep that promise." Outside, the spring day had blossomed into full warmth. I decided to walk for a while, my mind processing everything I'd learned. The streets of Oakwood Heights looked different somehow, more accessible, more mine. For 5 years, I'd felt like a visitor in this affluent community, out of place among the manicured lawns and luxury vehicles. Now, with each step, I reclaimed a little piece of myself. I stopped at a small cafe for lunch, something I rarely did alone. The simple act of ordering a meal, choosing a table by the window, watching the world pass by, all of it felt like a tiny revolution. When the server brought my soup and sandwich, I savored each bite, no longer rushing through a meal to avoid being in someone else's way. At 2 o'clock precisely, I met Thomas outside a modern building with a tasteful brick facade Large windows reflected the afternoon sunlight, and planters filled with spring flowers flanked the entrance. A doorman nodded respectfully as Thomas led me inside to an elevator. "Fifth floor," Thomas said as the doors closed. "Corner unit, with views of both the park and downtown." The elevator opened directly into a small private foyer. Thomas unlocked the door, then stepped back. "Go ahead," he encouraged. "It's yours." I stepped inside and immediately felt something I hadn't experienced in 5 years, a sense of belonging. The condo was spacious but not overwhelming, with an open floor plan that allowed natural light to flow through the entire space. Large windows offered the promised views: Evergreen Park to the east, the small downtown area to the north. The furnishings were simple but high quality: a comfortable sofa and chairs in the living area, a dining table that could seat 6, a well-appointed kitchen with gleaming appliances. The master bedroom featured a king-sized bed and ensuite bathroom with a soaking tub. A second bedroom had been set up as a combination guest room and office. What struck me most was the absence of decoration. No art on the walls, no photographs, no personal touches, just the bones of a home waiting to be brought to life. "Richard was very specific," Thomas commented as I explored. "He wanted to provide the essentials but leave the personalizing to you. He said you always had a better eye for those things." I ran my hand along the smooth countertop in the kitchen, imagining morning coffee by the window, meals prepared at my own pace, friends gathered around the dining table. "It's perfect," I said softly. "When can I move in?" "Immediately," Thomas replied. "The building manager is expecting you. All utilities are connected and paid through the management company. There's a reserved parking space in the garage, though you mentioned you don't drive much these days." "I never needed to," I explained. "Everything I needed was either within walking distance or—" I trailed off, realizing how dependent I'd become on James and Victoria's schedules, their willingness to drive me places. "Well, there's excellent transportation from here," Thomas assured me. "And if you decide you want a car, that can certainly be arranged." We discussed practical matters for a while longer, setting up bank accounts in my name, transferring utility billing, updating my identification with my new address. Through it all, a question kept circling in my mind, one I finally voiced as we prepared to leave. "What if they contest it?" I asked. "James or Victoria? What if they try to claim Richard wasn't of sound mind, or that I'm not capable of managing on my own?" Thomas's expression turned serious. "Richard anticipated that possibility. The trust is ironclad, established years before his death when his mental competence was beyond question. As for your capabilities—" He smiled slightly. "I've known you nearly as long as I knew Richard. I have no concerns about your ability to manage your affairs, and neither did he." The reassurance steadied me. "Thank you, Thomas, for everything. I'll have those keys copied for you right away," he promised as we stepped back into the elevator. "You can pick them up from my office tomorrow when you come for the safe deposit box." As we parted ways outside the building, I felt lighter than I had in years. The burden of dependence had lifted, replaced by the exhilarating weight of possibility. Richard had given me more than financial security. He'd given me the chance to rediscover myself. I decided to walk through Evergreen Park on my way back to James's house. The park was busy with after-school activities, children on the playground, teenagers tossing frisbees, older couples walking hand in hand along the winding paths. I found an empty bench near the duck pond and sat, watching life unfold around me. A young mother struggled to manage a stroller and an energetic toddler nearby. Without thinking, I stood and approached her. "Would you like some help?" I offered. She looked up, relief flooding her harried expression. "Would you mind holding him just for a minute while I fix this wheel? It keeps sticking." "Of course," I replied, reaching for the small boy who regarded me with solemn curiosity. "Hello there. I said softly as he was transferred to my arms. The child studied my face for a moment, then broke into a toothy grin. "Hi," he replied, instantly comfortable in the way only small children can be with perfect strangers. I chatted with him while his mother worked on the stroller, pointing out ducks and clouds and the ice cream vendor at the far end of the pond. When the stroller was fixed, I returned him reluctantly, having enjoyed the brief connection. "Thank you so much," the mother said sincerely. "Sometimes it feels like I'm trying to do everything at once." "I remember those days," I told her, with a smile. "It gets easier, and harder, but mostly different." She laughed at that, and we exchanged a look of understanding that transcended our age difference, one mother to another. As she continued on her way, I realized how much I'd missed these small, ordinary interactions that made up the fabric of daily life. At James's house, I'd become increasingly isolated, my world narrowing to the confines of my room and the rigid structures Victoria imposed. By the time I reached Cedar Avenue, the sun was beginning to set. I noticed Victoria's car in the driveway. She had returned then. Taking a deep breath, I opened the front door and stepped inside. The tension was palpable. Victoria and James sat in the living room, their postures stiff, conversation halting as I entered. Victoria's gaze was cool, her expression carefully neutral. James looked torn, his eyes moving between his wife and me with undisguised anxiety. "Mom?" he said, rising. "We were getting worried. Where have you been all day?" Before I could answer, Victoria cut in, her voice brittle with forced politeness. "Eleanor, we need to talk. About last night. And about arrangements going forward." I nodded, suddenly very tired of the pretense. "Yes, we do need to talk." I took a seat across from them, placing my purse beside me with deliberate calm. "I've spent the day with Richard's lawyer, reviewing my financial situation." Victoria's eyebrows rose slightly. "Lawyer? What lawyer?" "Thomas Bennett," I replied. "He's been managing Richard's affairs since before his death. Which brings me to what I wanted to discuss with you both." I took a deep breath, then continued. "I'll be moving out. I've seen a condominium today that suits my needs perfectly." James leaned forward, surprise evident in his expression. "You've already found a place? That was fast." "Richard found it for me," I explained. "Years ago. It's been waiting, just like everything else he arranged." Victoria's composed facade cracked slightly. "What exactly did Richard arrange?" she asked, a new edge to her voice. I met her gaze directly. "Financial independence, a home of my own, the freedom to live the remainder of my life on my terms." "How convenient," Victoria murmured, not quite under her breath. "And this all just came to light after our disagreement last night." "The timing is coincidental," I acknowledged, "but perhaps it's also fitting. I've spent 5 years trying to make myself smaller, less intrusive in your home. Now I find I don't have to do that anymore." James cleared his throat, clearly, uncomfortable with the undercurrents flowing between his wife and mother. "When are you thinking of moving, Mom?" "As soon as possible," I replied honestly. "The condo is ready now. I just need to pack my things and make arrangements for transportation." "I can help with that," James offered quickly. "This weekend, perhaps?" Victoria's fingers tightened around her water glass. "This seems very sudden, Eleanor. Are you sure you've thought this through? Living alone at your age can be challenging." The condescension in her tone might have once made me second-guess myself. Now, it simply confirmed I was making the right decision. "I managed quite well on my own after Richard died, before I moved here," I reminded her. "And the building has excellent security and maintenance services." "Where is this place?" James asked. "The Park View on Elm Street," I said. "About 10 minutes from here by car. Close enough to visit easily, but with my own space." Victoria's expression shifted subtly at the mention of the address. The park view was one of the most desirable residential buildings in Oakwood Heights. "That's an expensive building," she noted. "Yes," I agreed simply, offering no further explanation. An uncomfortable silence settled over the room. Finally, James spoke again. "I think it's great, Mom, if that's what you want. But you know you're always welcome here, right?" Victoria's tight smile suggested otherwise, but she nodded in apparent agreement. "Of course. We just want what's best for you." "Thank you," I replied, choosing to accept the platitude at face value. "I appreciate that, and I hope you'll both visit me once I'm settled. You and the children," I added, including Victoria in the invitation despite knowing she would likely never accept. "So tomorrow then?" James confirmed, already moving to practical matters. "I can rent a truck, help move your furniture." "I don't have much to take," I reminded him gently. "Most of my furniture is still in storage from when I sold the house. The condo is already furnished with the basics." This seemed to surprise him. "Right. I forgot about the storage unit. We should arrange to have that delivered too." The conversation shifted to logistics, boxes, movers, timing. Through it all, Victoria remained largely silent, her expression giving nothing away. But I could sense her mind working, recalculating based on this new information. For 5 years, she had held the power in our relationship, secure in the knowledge that I was financially dependent on her and James's charity. That equation had fundamentally changed. As the discussion wound down, Victoria stood abruptly. "If you'll both excuse me, I need to check on dinner. Michael texted that he'll be home soon, and Emma's joining us tonight as well." After she left, James turned to me, his voice low. "She came back this afternoon. We talked for a long time. She says she wants to make things right." "I'm glad," I said, meaning it. Despite everything, James loved Victoria, and they had built a life together. "But you understand why I need to leave?" He nodded slowly. "I just wish I'd seen what was happening, that I'd done something sooner." "We all have our blind spots," I told him, reaching over to pat his hand. "Especially when it comes to the people we love." "Will you stay for dinner?" he asked hopefully. "Emma would love to see you." I considered declining, the thought of another tense meal at the dining table holding little appeal. But then I thought of Michael saving my Christmas ornaments, of Emma's occasional text messages checking in on me, of the family ties that remained despite Victoria's efforts to fray them. "Yes," I decided. "I'll stay for dinner. But first, I'd like to freshen up." In my room, soon to be my former room, I sat on the edge of the bed and released a long, slow breath. The day's revelations and decisions had left me emotionally drained, but resolute. On the nightstand, Richard's watch caught the late afternoon light, its hands steadily marking time as they had for decades. I picked it up, running my thumb across the worn face. "You thought of everything, didn't you?" I whispered to the empty room. "Even how to set me free." Tomorrow, I would begin packing the small collection of possessions I'd accumulated during my stay. Tomorrow, I would visit the safe deposit box and read Richard's final letter to me. Tomorrow, I would take the first real step toward reclaiming my independence. But tonight, I would have dinner with my family. Not in the kitchen, not excluded from conversation or relegated to the sidelines, but properly at the table where I belonged. Whatever Victoria's true feelings about my impending departure, she would have to acknowledge me now. Not as a burden to be tolerated, but as Eleanor Patterson, a woman of means and agency who had chosen, for tonight at least, to share a meal with her family. I changed into a simple navy dress I rarely wore, applying a touch of lipstick and arranging my silver hair with more care than usual. Small rebellions, perhaps, but significant in their own way. When I heard Emma's voice in the hallway, I emerged from my room with squared shoulders and a genuine smile. ready to face whatever the evening might bring. Emma arrived in a flurry of energy, her backpack slung carelessly over one shoulder and her dark hair pulled into a messy bun. At 21, she had blossomed into a beautiful young woman with Richard's curious mind and my stubborn determination. College had given her a new confidence, a sense of self separate from the carefully managed environment Victoria had created in their home. "Grandma!" she exclaimed when she saw me, her face lighting up with genuine pleasure. She crossed the room in 3 quick strides and enveloped me in a hug that smelled of coffee and textbooks. "You look amazing. Is that a new dress?" "Just one I don't wear often," I replied, returning her embrace with equal warmth. "It's wonderful to see you, sweetheart. How are your classes going?" Before she could answer, Victoria appeared in the doorway, her hostess' smile firmly in place. "Emma, there you are. Dinner's almost ready. Why don't you both come to the table?" I noted that she'd included me in the invitation without hesitation, progress, or perhaps just pragmatism given what she now knew about my financial situation. The dining room was set with Victoria's usual precision, the good china, crystal glasses, linen napkins folded just so. 5 place settings, not 4, with mine positioned directly across from James, rather than at the far end where I'd sat on those increasingly rare occasions when I'd been permitted to join family meals. Michael was already seated, his phone set, aside when he saw me enter. "Hey, Grandma," he greeted me with a small smile. "You're staying for dinner?" "I am," I confirmed, taking my seat with a quiet confidence I hadn't felt in this room for years. Emma settled beside me, immediately launching into a detailed account of her psychology professor's unconventional teaching methods. I listened attentively, asking questions at all the right moments, aware of Victoria's gaze flicking between us as she brought serving dishes to the table. Dinner itself was a study in forced normalcy. Victoria had prepared her signature roast chicken, a dish she normally reserved for special occasions, which typically hadn't included me. James kept the conversation flowing, carefully navigating around any potentially sensitive topics. Emma and Michael followed his lead, though I caught them exchanging glances when Victoria abruptly changed the subject after Emma mentioned visiting me at my new place. "So, Grandma," Emma said during a lull in the conversation, "Michael says you're moving to the Parkview. That's super close to campus. Maybe I can come study at your place sometimes? The library gets so crowded during finals." "I'd love that," I replied sincerely, watching Victoria's knuckles whiten around her fork. "Anytime. I'll make sure you have a key." "A key?" Victoria interjected, her tone carefully modulated. "That seems unnecessary when Emma has a perfectly good study space here at home." Emma rolled her eyes, a gesture just subtle enough that only I caught it. "Mom, the campus is closer to Grandma's new place than here. It would save me the commute." "Still," Victoria persisted, "giving out keys to your new home before you've even moved in seems premature, Eleanor. Security is important at your age." There it was, the familiar undermining wrapped in concern, the implication that I couldn't be trusted to make sound decisions. In the past, I might have backed down, might have nodded and agreed, and later found a way to slip Emma a key without Victoria knowing. But that Eleanor was gone. "The Parkview has excellent security," I replied evenly, "and I'm quite capable of deciding who should have access to my home. Emma and Michael will both have keys, as will James," I added, nodding toward my son. "You're all welcome anytime." A moment of silence followed my declaration. James cleared his throat, clearly searching for a way to diffuse the tension. Before he could speak, Michael looked directly at Victoria. "Mom, why don't you want Emma to have a key to Grandma's place?" The blunt question hung in the air. Victoria's expression flickered between surprise and annoyance. "I never said that, Michael. I'm simply concerned about your grandmother's safety. Grandma's been taking care of herself for a long time," Michael pointed out. "And it's her place. Shouldn't she decide who gets keys?" Victoria set down her utensils with deliberate care. Of course she should. I was merely offering a suggestion. It didn't sound like a suggestion, Emma murmured, just loud enough to be heard. James intervened before Victoria could respond. Let's table this discussion for now, shall we? Mom's move is still a few days away. There's plenty of time to work out the details. The conversation shifted to safer territory. Michael's upcoming graduation, James's latest project at work. I participated politely, but my thoughts kept returning to the exchange about the keys. It was such a small thing in isolation, but it represented something much larger. Victoria's need to control, to maintain authority over family relationships, to position herself as the gatekeeper through which all interactions must pass. After dinner, Victoria disappeared into the kitchen, pointedly declining offers of help. Emma pulled me into the living room, eager to show me photos from a recent campus event on her phone. We sat together on the sofa, heads bent over the small screen as she swiped through images of friends and activities. I'm really glad you're getting your own place, Grandma, she said quietly when James and Michael had drifted into another conversation across the room. It's been weird seeing how things are here. What do you mean? I asked, though I suspected. I knew. Emma hesitated, glancing toward Victoria's direction before continuing. When I came home from freshman year, I noticed how Mom had kind of pushed you to the side. Like all your things were gone from the common areas and you were eating in the kitchen most nights. She frowned, the expression making her look startlingly like Richard when something had troubled him. I asked Dad about it, but he just said you preferred it that way. I never believed that. No, I agreed softly. I didn't prefer it. Why? Didn't you say something? The question wasn't accusatory, just genuinely puzzled. I considered how to explain the gradual erosion of my confidence, the slow acceptance of my diminished place in the household. Sometimes, I said carefully, when you're dependent on others for your basic needs, you learn to accommodate their preferences, even when they hurt you. You tell yourself it's a fair exchange for their support. Emma's eyes widened slightly. But that's not fair at all. No, I agreed. It isn't. It took me too long to recognize that. She squeezed my hand. Well, I'm glad you're not accommodating anymore. The way you stood up to Mom about the keys was awesome. I smiled, warmed by her support. It feels good to reclaim my voice. Will you tell me about your new place? She asked, her enthusiasm infectious. Michael said it has a view of the park. As I described the condo to her, I saw genuine excitement in her expression. For the first time in years, I was offering something of value to my granddaughter, not just my presence, but a space where she could come and go freely without Victoria's watchful oversight. Victoria rejoined us, carrying a tray of coffee and dessert with the practiced grace of a woman who had spent years perfecting the art of entertaining. I thought we might have coffee in here tonight, she announced, setting down the tray on the coffee table. Eleanor, would you like a cup? Yes, thank you, I replied, noting the use of my full name. Never Mom or even Ellie, as friends called me, always the more formal Eleanor that maintained emotional distance. As Victoria handed me a cup, I noticed her assessing glance at Emma and me sitting close together on the sofa. Something in her expression hardened briefly before smoothing back into her hostess' smile. Emma, I meant to tell you, she said, her voice casual as she took a seat across from us. Dr. Henderson called today. You remember, my friend who works in the university administration? She mentioned there's an opening for a research assistant position in the psychology department next semester. She thinks you'd be perfect for it. Emma straightened, clearly interested despite herself. Really? Wow, that would be amazing. Did she say who the professor is? Dr. Kaplan, I believe. I have her number if you want to follow up tomorrow. Victoria smiled, satisfied with Emma's reaction. It's quite competitive, but With a recommendation from Caroline, you'd have an excellent chance. I watched this exchange with a mixture of admiration and wariness. Victoria was skilled at this, creating opportunities for the children that came through her connections, her influence. It bound them to her in ways large and small, reinforced her importance in their lives and successes. I couldn't fault her for helping Emma's career, but I recognized the subtle reminder of power that accompanied the offer. The evening continued peacefully enough, though I noticed Victoria made a point of mentioning several other connections she had recently utilized on Emma's behalf. Introductions to influential faculty, invitations to exclusive departmental events. Each reference underscored the same message. Victoria had access and influence that I, with all my newfound financial security, could not match. By 9 o'clock, I was exhausted, not physically, but emotionally drained from navigating the undercurrents of the evening. I made my excuses and prepared to retire to my room. Emma hugged me tightly, promising to call the next day to help with packing. Michael, in his more reserved way, squeezed my shoulder and murmured, "Night, Grandma." James walked me to my door, hesitating before asking, "Was it okay? Dinner, I mean." I appreciated his concern, even if it came too late. "It was fine, James. Different, but fine." He nodded, clearly relieved. "Victoria's trying. She really is." "I know," I said, though I wasn't entirely convinced her efforts were motivated by genuine remorse, rather than adjustment to changed circumstances. "Good night, son." "Night, Mom. Love you." In the privacy of my room, I sat at the small vanity and removed my earrings, studying my reflection in the mirror. The woman who looked back at me seemed different somehow, her posture straighter, her eyes clearer. 5 years of adapting to Victoria's home had gradually dimmed something in me, a light that was now rekindling. I slept deeply that night, without the restless anxiety that had plagued me for years. In my dreams, Richard was there, smiling his crooked smile, nodding approvingly as if to say, "That's my Ellie. I knew you'd find your way." Morning arrived with pale sunlight filtering through the curtains. I dressed with care, choosing comfortable clothes suitable for the day's tasks. The house was quiet when I emerged. James would have already left for work. Victoria was likely at her Pilates class, and the children were normally late risers. I made myself a simple breakfast and ate in peaceful solitude at the kitchen counter, enjoying the rare opportunity to move freely in a space that had become increasingly off-limits to me. Afterward, I washed my dishes and set them in the rack to dry, then gathered my purse and the folder Thomas had given me. Today, I would visit the bank to access Richard's safe deposit box, then begin the practical work of preparing for my move. As I opened the front door, I nearly collided with Victoria, returning from her exercise class in fitted leggings and a coordinating jacket, her blonde hair pulled back in a neat ponytail despite the workout. She looked momentarily startled to find me leaving. "Oh, Eleanor, you're up early." Her gaze flicked to my purse and the folder tucked under my arm. "Going somewhere?" "To the bank," I replied simply. "I have some business to take care of." She nodded, stepping aside to let me pass. "James mentioned you're planning to move this weekend. I've arranged for our housekeeper to help you pack tomorrow. She's very efficient." The offer caught me off guard. Practical assistance wasn't Victoria's usual approach. "That's thoughtful but unnecessary. Emma's coming to help, and I don't have much to pack." "I insist," Victoria said, her tone making it clear this wasn't truly an offer but a decision already made. "Maria is excellent with fragile items. I want to make sure your things are properly cared for." I considered refusing, again, but recognized the gesture for what it was. An attempt to maintain involvement, to oversee even my departure. "Thank you," I said instead. "That's kind." Victoria's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "We want to make this transition as smooth as possible for you." I stepped past her onto the porch, then paused, turning back. "Victoria, I know this." Situation isn't what you expected. Change rarely is. But I hope we can find a way forward that respects everyone's needs. She regarded me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Of course, she finally said. Family is everything. The platitude hung between us, both knowing how differently we defined family and who belonged within its circle. With a small nod, I continued down the walkway, feeling her gaze on my back until I reached the sidewalk. The day was pleasantly warm, spring firmly established in Oakwood Heights. I decided to walk to the bank, enjoying the simple freedom of setting my own pace. Along the way, I passed other pedestrians, mothers with strollers, business people hurrying to meetings, elderly couples taking their morning constitutional. For so long, I had felt disconnected from this community, a visitor rather than a resident. Now, I allowed myself to imagine becoming part of it again, shopping at the local markets, perhaps joining the garden club at the community center, developing routines that were purely my own. First National Bank of Oakwood occupied a stately brick building on Main Street. Inside, the cool marble lobby echoed with hushed conversations and the discreet clicking of computer keys. I approached the customer service desk and presented my identification along with the paperwork Thomas had provided. After a brief verification process, I was escorted to a private room where the safe deposit box awaited. The bank officer opened the outer lock with his key, then left me alone to use my newly acquired key for the second lock. The metal box slid open smoothly, revealing several neatly organized folders, a small velvet pouch, and an envelope with my name written in Richard's distinctive handwriting. I reached for the envelope first, my fingers trembling slightly. The flap was sealed with wax, an old-fashioned touch so characteristic of my husband. Carefully breaking the seal, I removed several pages of heavy stationery covered in Richard's neat penmanship. My dearest Ellie, the letter began, instantly bringing tears to my eyes. I blinked them away, determined to read his final words with clarity. If you're reading this, you've finally discovered what I've been preparing for years. I hope you'll forgive me for keeping these arrangements secret. You always said I was a terrible secret keeper, but it seems I managed this one well enough. I'm writing this as you sleep in the next room. You had a difficult day. The roses needed pruning, and you pushed yourself too hard despite my protests. Even now, when you're tired and your hands are scratched from the thorns, you're the most beautiful woman I've ever known. I don't know when you'll read these words. Perhaps soon after I'm gone, or perhaps years will pass before you find your way to this box. Either way, what matters is that you found it now, and with it, the freedom I've tried to secure for you. Ellie, we've spoken often about what might happen after I'm gone. You've always insisted you'd be fine, that you'd manage whatever came. I believe in your strength, I always have. But I also know our world doesn't always treat aging women with the respect and dignity they deserve, especially those who find themselves alone. What I've arranged isn't just money, though that's important. It's independence, the ability to say no when you need to create the life you want rather than the one others might choose for you. To be Ellie Patterson, not just someone's mother or grandmother or widow. The condo at the Parkview is yours, furnished as simply as possible because I know you'll want to make it your own. The rental property in Pine Valley provides steady income. Old Mrs. Abernathy still manages it, and she sends her love. She's getting on in years herself, but her nephew is learning the business and seems competent enough. The cabin at the lake belongs half to you, half to my brother George. You know he rarely uses it, but it's there if you want a retreat. The fishing's still good, according to George, though I suspect he exaggerates his catches as much as ever. The velvet pouch contains my mother's pearls. I know you always admired them, but insisted they should go to James's wife someday. I'm overruling that particular bit of generosity, my love. They belong on your neck, not tucked away in someone else's jewelry box. There's money, of course. Thomas has all the details. It's not a fortune by today's standards, but it's enough for comfort, for security, for choices. Use it well. Use it for joy. I have one request, though you're free to ignore it if it doesn't feel right. Don't let our family fragment after I'm gone. James has always looked to you as his moral compass, though he may not always follow where it points. The grandchildren need your wisdom, your stories, your particular way of seeing the world. Whatever relationships emerge in the years ahead, try to keep those bonds intact, even if they must change form. Now for the most important part, though. You already know it. I have loved you completely, Ellie. From the moment you walked into that dance hall in your blue dress, looking vaguely annoyed at your friend for dragging you there, I was yours. Through everything that followed, the good years and the hard ones, the arguments and reconciliations, the dreams realized and those left behind, that love has only deepened. I don't fear death, Ellie, but I do regret leaving you. If there's any justice in whatever comes next, I'll find a way to wait for you. Take your time, though. Live fully. Find new adventures. Know that whatever happiness you discover honors rather than diminishes what we've shared. All my love, now and always, Richard. I sat motionless, the letter trembling in my hands. Richard's voice so clear in my mind I could almost believe he was in the room with me. Tears flowed freely now, dropping onto the paper before I could wipe them away. I made no attempt to stop them. These were healing tears, washing away years of doubt and diminishment. When I had composed myself, I carefully folded the letter and returned it to its envelope. The velvet pouch yielded a single strand of pearls, lustrous and warm against my palm. I remembered them around Richard's mother's neck at family gatherings, how she had once let me try them on at Christmas, laughing that they suited me better than her old throat. Without hesitation, I fastened them around my neck. Their weight, familiar and comforting. The remaining folders contained additional documentation, property deeds, account statements, insurance policies, all meticulously organized with Richard's characteristic attention to detail. I reviewed each one carefully, then returned them to the box. I would need to come back with Thomas to transfer some of these documents, but the immediate task was complete. I had received Richard's final gift, not just financial security, but the validation that I was worthy of independence, of choices, of a life shaped by my own desires. As I left the bank, I touched the pearls at my throat, drawing strength from their connection to Richard. The day stretched before me, full of practical tasks, collecting packing materials, beginning to sort my belongings, meeting with Thomas to sign additional paperwork. But underlying these mundane activities was a profound sense of awakening, as if I had emerged from a long hibernation into unexpected spring. On impulse, I changed direction and headed toward the park view. The doorman recognized me from the previous day and welcomed me with a respectful nod. "Good morning, Mrs. Patterson. Mr. Bennett called to say you might be stopping by. Your keys are ready at the front desk." The simple acknowledgement, Mrs. Patterson, rather than James's mother or Eleanor, felt like reclaiming a piece of my identity. I collected the keys, then took the elevator to the 5th floor, eager to see my new home in the clear light of morning. The condo felt different today, more real, more mine. I moved from room to room, mentally placing furniture, planning color, schemes, imagining mornings spent reading by the eastern windows and evenings watching the sunset from the small balcony. In the guest room that would double as an office, I pictured Emma studying at the desk, Michael lounging on the bed with his music, the space alive with their energy. The kitchen drew me in with its clean lines and modern appliances. I opened cupboards and drawers, finding them empty but full of possibility. Here I would bake again. Cookies for the grandchildren, bread that filled the home with its yeasty aroma, pies with lattice tops that Richard had always praised as works of art. I would host dinners where everyone had a place at the table, where conversation flowed without monitoring, where no one ate alone in a separate room. Standing by the large windows overlooking the park, I felt a profound sense of rightness settle over me. This place, these rooms, this view, this opportunity had waited patiently while I found my way here. Richard had known somehow that I would need this fresh start, this chance to redefine myself beyond the roles of caretaker and tolerated guest. My phone chirped with a text message from Emma. On campus, but can come help with packing this afternoon. Need anything from town? I smiled at her thoughtfulness and replied, just your company. Come to the house around 3? Her response came quickly. Perfect. Can't wait to hear about the condo. I slipped the phone back into my purse, my heart light with anticipation of Emma's visit. For so long, my interactions with my grandchildren had been subtly managed by Victoria, scheduled around her preferences, contained within spaces she controlled, often overseen by her watchful presence. The thought of spending time with Emma without those constraints felt like an unexpected gift. As I prepared to leave, taking one last look around the empty space that would soon become home, my phone rang. The screen showed James's number, unusual, for him to call during his workday. Mom? His voice sounded strained when I answered. Where are you? At the condo, I replied. Is everything all right? A hesitation, then. Victoria called me. She's upset about the pearls. I touched the strand at my neck, confused. The pearls? How does she even know about them? She went into your room to measure for drapes. She says she's planning to convert it to a home office after you move, and noticed your jewelry box was open. She recognized grandmother's pearls and called me immediately. The casual invasion of privacy didn't surprise me, but Victoria's reaction did. These were Richard's mother's pearls, James. He left them specifically to me in his letter. I know, Mom, and they're rightfully yours. It's just... He sighed heavily. Victoria says grandmother promised them to her years ago, at our wedding, that they were to be passed down to the wife of the eldest son. I frowned, certain no such promise had been made. Richard's mother had been particular about her possessions and had distributed most of them before her death with clear instructions. The pearls had remained in Richard's keeping with her explicit direction that he decide their fate. That's not true, James. Your grandmother never made such a promise. These pearls were Richard's to bestow, and he chose to leave them to me. Another weighty pause. Could you, maybe, consider letting Victoria have them anyway? As a gesture of goodwill? She's quite upset. The request struck me like a physical blow. After everything, the years of subtle humiliation, the exclusion, the condescension, James was still asking me to accommodate Victoria's feelings, to surrender something precious that Richard had explicitly intended for me. No, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I won't be doing that. Mom? James, I interrupted gently. These pearls were a gift from your father, left to me in a letter I read just this morning. They're not just jewelry, they're a connection to him, to his mother, to our shared history. I'm sorry if that disappoints Victoria, but my answer is no. He didn't respond immediately, and I could picture him at his desk, torn between his wife's demands and his mother's refusal. I understand, he finally said, though his tone suggested otherwise. Will you be home for dinner? The question felt loaded, as if my answer would determine which side I was choosing in this new conflict. No, I replied after a moment's consideration. I have some errands to run and then I'll need to start packing. Emma's coming by later to help. Right, he said, sounding distracted. Well, I should get back to work. We'll talk more later. After we hung up, I remained by the window, gazing out at the park without really seeing it. The pearls felt heavier now around my neck, weighted with Victoria's covetousness and James's divided loyalties. For a moment, I questioned my decision. Would it have been wiser to surrender this one battle to maintain peace? But as quickly as the doubt arose, it was replaced by certainty. The pearls were mine, left to me by the man who had loved me for 50 years. More importantly, my right to keep what was given to me was not negotiable, not a matter for family consensus or emotional manipulation. With renewed resolve, I locked the condo and headed back to Cedar Avenue, ready to face whatever awaited me there. The walk gave me time to prepare myself for potential confrontation, to consider how I wished to navigate this latest challenge to my autonomy. Victoria's car was in the driveway when I arrived, though I had half expected she might conveniently be out. I entered the house quietly, hearing her voice from the direction of her home office. She appeared to be on a phone call, her tone animated as she discussed fabric selections with someone. Taking advantage of her distraction, I slipped into my room and closed the door. The evidence of her invasion was immediately apparent. The jewelry box indeed open on the dresser, its contents slightly rearranged from how I'd left them. A measuring tape lay abandoned on the windowsill, confirming her story about measuring for drapes. The thought of her planning to reclaim my space before I'd even departed sent a chill through me, but I pushed the feeling aside. Soon, this room would no longer be my concern. I began gathering packing materials I'd collected earlier. Boxes from the local grocery, tissue paper saved from gifts, bubble wrap purchased from the shipping store. As I worked, sorting possessions into categories, I heard Victoria's call, and, followed by the soft tread of her footsteps approaching my door. A light knock preceded her entrance, a courtesy she rarely extended. "Eleanor? Oh, you're back." Her gaze immediately went to the pearls at my neck, her expression tightening almost imperceptibly. "Yes," I replied simply, continuing to wrap a small ceramic figurine Emma had given me years ago. "Just starting to pack." Victoria stepped further into the room, her arms crossed defensively across her chest. "James called me. He said you refused to discuss the pearls." I set down the figurine carefully. "There's nothing to discuss, Victoria. The pearls were Richard's mother's. He left them to me in a letter I found today in his safe deposit box. His mother promised them to me," she insisted, a flush rising in her cheeks. "At our wedding reception, she said the eldest son's wife should have them, that it was tradition." I regarded her steadily, noting the mixture of entitlement and uncertainty in her expression. "I was with Richard's mother the entire reception, Victoria. She made no such promise to you or anyone else. She gave you the silver candlesticks from her dining room, which you returned to the store the following week for credit." Victoria blanched, clearly not expecting me to remember that particular detail. "That's not... I only exchanged them for something more practical." She wouldn't have minded. "Perhaps not," I conceded, "but the point remains. These pearls are mine. Richard left them to me with very clear instructions, and I intend to honor his wishes." She stared at me for a long moment, calculation visible behind her eyes. When she spoke again, her voice had softened. "Eleanor, I understand this must be an emotional time for you. Finding Richard's letter, preparing to move, it's a lot of change all at once." I recognized the shift in tactics, from direct confrontation to concerned manipulation. "Yes, it is," I agreed. "But it's change I'm ready for." "I'm just concerned that you might be making decisions hastily," she continued, her tone solicitous. "The pearls have always been meant for the family's next generation. Wouldn't Richard want them to stay with the direct line? Perhaps for Emma to have someday." The invocation of Emma's name was a clever move, appealing to my love for my granddaughter. But the transparent strategy only strengthened my resolve. "When the time comes, I'll decide what happens to the pearls," I said calmly. "Just as Richard's mother decided, and as Richard himself decided. That's how family heirlooms work, Victoria. They're passed along at the discretion of their current keeper, not according to rules invented after the fact." Her facade of concern crumbled, revealing the anger beneath. You've always been difficult, she said, her voice low and tight. Always finding ways to remind everyone that you were here first, that you have some special claim on this family. The accusation was so contrary to reality that I almost laughed. Is that truly how you see me? The woman who ate alone in the kitchen while her family dined together, who was asked to stay in her room during gatherings, who watched her possessions disappear from common areas until no trace of her remained. Victoria's expression hardened. You chose to live with us, Eleanor. We opened our home to you. If the arrangements weren't to your liking, you could have said something. Where exactly was I supposed to go? I asked quietly. Without the financial resources I've only just discovered, what were my options? A subsidized apartment, far from my family? A retirement home where I'd rarely see my grandchildren? You knew I had nowhere else to go, Victoria. That's why you felt free to treat me as you did. I've treated you with nothing but respect, she insisted, though her eyes slid away from mine. If you felt otherwise, that was your own interpretation. I shook my head, suddenly tired of the pretense. We both know that isn't true, but it doesn't matter now. In a few days, I'll be gone, and you can turn this room into whatever you like. The pearls, however, are coming with me. Victoria opened her mouth as if to continue the argument, then closed it again. After a tense moment, she turned toward the door. This isn't over, Eleanor. James and I will discuss this further tonight. There's nothing to discuss, I replied, returning to my packing. But you're welcome to try. After she left, closing the door with deliberate control, I sat on the edge of the bed and released a shaky breath. Confrontation had never been my strong suit. I'd spent a lifetime finding compromise, smoothing ruffled feathers, prioritizing harmony over personal desires, standing firm against Victoria's demands, refusing to yield even in the face of James's implied disapproval, required muscles I had rarely exercised. Yet as I touched the pearls at my neck, I felt no regret for my stance. Richard had chosen to leave them to me, had written explicitly of his decision in his final letter. They were more than jewelry. They were his last tangible gift, imbued with the history of our shared life and his enduring love. I returned to packing with renewed purpose, sorting through the accumulated possessions of 5 years. There was surprisingly little I wished to take from this room: clothes, a few books, photographs, small mementos from Richard and the grandchildren. The furniture had come with the room and would remain. The generic artwork on the walls held no personal significance. Even the bedding had been chosen by Victoria to match her preferred color scheme. How strange, I thought as I folded sweaters into a box, to have lived in a space for 5 years and left so little imprint on it. It was as if I had been gradually erasing myself, accommodating Victoria's vision until I became nearly invisible. The woman who had once maintained a home filled with color and texture, who had gardened with passionate attention to every bloom, who had displayed family photographs on every available surface, that woman had been carefully contained until she occupied the smallest possible space. But not anymore. The pearls around my neck were just the beginning, a first reclamation of self that would continue in my new home, in my new life. Victoria might never approve, might never truly accept me as an equal member of the family, but her approval was no longer necessary for my happiness. Outside my window, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawn. Soon Emma would arrive, bringing her youthful energy and genuine affection. Together we would continue this work of packing, of gathering the pieces of Eleanor Patterson to relocate them where they could once again expand and flourish. The pearls gleamed softly in the slanting light, their iridescence a reminder of all that endured beyond a single lifetime: love, memory, connection. I touched them once more, feeling Richard's presence in their smooth, cool surfaces. "Thank you," I whispered, to him and to the pearls themselves, guardians of a legacy that was mine to carry forward. Emma arrived at precisely 3 o'clock. Her arrival announced by the cheerful honking of her compact car in the driveway. I watched from the window as she gathered her backpack and what appeared to be several collapsed cardboard boxes from her trunk. Her energy was visible even from a distance. Quick movements, purposeful strides, the slight bounce in her step that had characterized her since childhood. I opened the front door before she could knock, and her face lit up with a smile that warmed me to my core. "Grandma, I brought reinforcements," she announced, gesturing to the boxes tucked under her arm. "And bubble wrap, lots of bubble wrap." "You're a treasure," I told her, stepping aside to let her enter. "Come in. I've already started in my room." Emma glanced around the foyer as she passed, her expression turning wary. "Is Mom home?" "In her office, I believe," I replied quietly. "Working on some design project?" Emma nodded, relief flickering across her features. "Good. She stopped herself, looking slightly guilty. "It's just easier if we can work without interruptions." I understood the unspoken sentiment. Victoria's presence would have introduced tension, constant evaluation, perhaps even interference in our packing decisions. "It's just us for now," I assured her, leading the way to my room. Emma set down her supplies and surveyed the partially packed boxes with an assessing eye. "You travel light, Grandma. I think I have more stuff in my dorm room than you have here." 5 years and this is all that survived, I acknowledged, gesturing to the modest collection. Though there's still the storage unit with furniture, and bigger items from the old house. Emma picked up a framed photograph from the dresser, Richard and me at our 40th anniversary party, his arm around my waist, both of us laughing at something just out of frame. "I love this picture," she said softly. "You both look so happy." "We were," I confirmed, the memory sweet rather than painful. "Your grandfather had just told a terribly inappropriate joke that made the photographer blush." Emma grinned, carefully, wrapping the frame in bubble wrap before placing it in a box. Classic Grandpa. He always knew how to make everyone laugh. She paused, her expression growing more serious. "Do you miss him? Still, I mean." I considered the question, appreciating its directness. "Every day," I admitted, "but differently now than at first. The missing has softened, I suppose. It's become part of who I am rather than a sharp pain that stops me in my tracks." She nodded thoughtfully, selecting another item to wrap. "I think about him sometimes when I'm struggling with a tough assignment or decision. I try to imagine what advice he'd give." "And what does he tell you?" I asked, curious about this internal conversation my granddaughter maintained with her grandfather. "Usually to stop overthinking and trust my instincts," she replied with a small smile. "And to remember that most failures are just practice for future success." "That sounds exactly like him," I said, my heart full at this evidence that Richard lived on in Emma's mind and choices. He was very wise beneath all those terrible jokes. We worked companionably for the next hour, Emma asking questions about various objects as we packed them, each item unlocking stories I hadn't shared in years. The silver thimble that had belonged to my grandmother, the watercolor Richard had painted on our honeymoon, the carved wooden box where I kept pressed flowers from significant occasions, each held meaning that Emma absorbed with genuine interest. "Grandma, these are beautiful," she said, carefully lifting a pair of hand-knitted baby booties from the drawer where I kept special mementos. "Did you make these for Dad?" "I did," I confirmed, gently taking them from her hands. "My mother taught me to knit when I was pregnant with him. I wasn't very skilled. The stitches are uneven if you look closely. But your father wore them until his little toes poked right through the ends." Emma smiled, watching as I wrapped them in tissue paper. "Will you teach me someday? To knit, I mean. I've always wanted to learn." The request touched me deeply. "I'd love to," I told her. "We can start once I'm settled in the new place." "Perfect. I can bring my laptop and study while you teach me." Her enthusiasm was contagious. We could make it a regular thing, knitting Sundays or something. The thought of establishing new traditions with my granddaughter, rituals untouched by Victoria's influence, filled me with quiet joy. That sounds wonderful, Emma. As we continued packing, I noticed Emma glancing occasionally at the pearls around my neck, her expression curious but hesitant. Finally, she broached the subject. "Those are really pretty pearls, Grandma. Are they new?" Given the earlier confrontation with Victoria, I chose my words carefully. "They belonged to your great-grandmother, your grandfather's mother. I found them today in a safe deposit box Richard left for me. He wanted me to have them." Emma nodded, processing this information. "They suit you. Classic, but not stuffy." She tilted her head slightly. "Has Mom seen them?" The perceptiveness of the question confirmed my suspicion that Emma was more aware of household dynamics than she typically let on. "She has," I acknowledged. "She feels they should have gone to her instead." Emma rolled her eyes, a gesture so reminiscent of Richard when faced with absurdity that it made me smile despite the tension of the situation. "Of course she does. Mom thinks everything valuable should automatically be hers." "Emma," I cautioned, gently, "your mother has many fine qualities. She's just particular about certain things." "Particular is one word for it," Emma muttered, then caught herself. "Sorry. I know she's my mother and I should be more respectful. It's just, I've seen how she treats you, Grandma. It's not right." I paused in my packing, considering how to respond. Emma was an adult now, capable of forming her own assessments of family dynamics. Yet I had no desire to drive a wedge between mother and daughter, regardless of my own complicated relationship with Victoria. "Families are complex," I said finally. "Your mother and I have different approaches to many things, but I believe she wants what's best for you and Michael, just as I do." Emma seemed to accept this diplomatic answer, though her expression remained skeptical. We returned to our task, the conversation shifting to lighter topics: Emma's classes, her plans for the summer break, a new coffee shop near campus that had become her favorite study spot. We had nearly finished packing the closet when a knock at the bedroom door interrupted our work. James stood in the doorway, his tie loosened and briefcase still in hand, clearly just arrived home from the office. "Hey, you two," he greeted us, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Making progress?" "Dad!" Emma brightened at the sight of her father. "I thought you'd be working late today. We've got Grandma almost packed up. She's surprisingly minimalist." "For someone her age." James chuckled, though the sound lacked its usual warmth. "Your grandmother has never been one for unnecessary possessions." His gaze flicked to the pearls at my neck, a small furrow appearing between his brows. "Emma, would you mind giving me a moment with Grandma? I think your mother was looking for you earlier." Emma glanced between us, clearly sensing tension. "Sure," she said slowly, setting down the book she'd been wrapping. "I'll be back in a bit, Grandma. Don't finish without me." After she left, James closed the door partially and sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Mom, Victoria's extremely upset about the pearls." I straightened, my back protesting after hours of bending over boxes. So I gathered from our conversation earlier. "She says grandmother explicitly promised them to her," he continued, his tone carefully neutral, "as a family heirloom that would pass to the wife of the eldest son." "Your grandmother made no such promise," I replied firmly. "And even if she had, the pearls became Richard's property after her death. He chose to leave them to me, James. I have his letter specifically, stating his wishes." James shifted uncomfortably. "I understand that, Mom, but Victoria feels very strongly about this. She's talking about family tradition and proper succession of heirlooms." "Traditions she's invented," I pointed out. Your grandmother would have been the first to tell you she had no interest in proper succession. She gave her possessions to those she felt would appreciate them most. That may be true, but James hesitated, clearly struggling to find the right words. This situation is creating significant tension in my marriage. Victoria feels disrespected, overlooked. The irony of his concern for Victoria's feelings of being overlooked was not lost on me, given the years I had spent being precisely that in their home. But I kept this observation to myself, focusing instead on the core issue. I'm sorry for any strain this is causing, James. Truly. But these pearls were Richard's final gift to me, mentioned specifically in a letter I read just this morning. Surely you can understand why they hold special significance. James's expression flickered with conflicting emotions, understanding, frustration, the discomfort of being caught between his wife's demands and his mother's refusal. I do understand, Mom, but I'm asking you to consider the bigger picture. Family harmony, maintaining relationships. Would you ask Victoria to give up something her mother had specifically left to her? I asked quietly. Something with deep personal meaning? He didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. It's different, he finally said. The pearls are a Patterson family heirloom. And I am a Patterson, I reminded him gently. I have been for 50 years, James. These pearls aren't just jewelry to me. They're a connection to Richard, to his mother, to the family we built together. James looked away, his discomfort palpable. After a long moment, he nodded slightly. I'll try to explain it to Victoria again, but I can't promise she'll understand. I don't expect you to make promises on her behalf, I said. I only ask that you respect my decision about something that is rightfully mine. He seemed about to say more, then checked himself. I should let you get back to packing. Do you need help with anything? Emma has been wonderful, I assured him. And I understand the moving truck is scheduled for Saturday morning? Yes, 9 o'clock, he confirmed. I've arranged for professional movers to handle everything. They'll go to the storage unit first, then come here for your boxes. Thank you, I said sincerely. That's very thoughtful. An awkward silence fell between us, heavy with unspoken tensions. Finally, James cleared his throat. I should check in with Victoria. Will you join us for dinner tonight? The invitation seemed perfunctory, his tone suggesting he expected, perhaps hoped, I would decline. Not tonight, I said, sparing him the discomfort of a tense family meal. Emma and I still have quite a bit to do here, and I'm rather tired. I think I'll have something simple in my room later. Relief flickered across his features. Of course, you've had a busy day. I'll let you rest. After he left, I sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly weary beyond the physical exertion of packing. The conversation with James had clarified something I'd suspected, but hadn't fully acknowledged. In the conflict between Victoria's wishes and mine, James would ultimately side with his wife. He might express understanding of my position, might even advocate for me behind closed doors. But when pressed, his loyalty lay with the family he had created, rather than the one he had come from. I couldn't fault him for this choice. It was natural, perhaps even necessary for his marriage to function. But the recognition still stung, a reminder that my place in the family hierarchy had fundamentally shifted with Richard's passing. Emma returned a few minutes later, her expression clouded. Dad asked me to help Mom with something in the dining room, she explained, resuming her spot beside the half-packed box. But I told her I promised to finish helping you first. I smiled at my granddaughter's loyalty. You didn't have to do that, Emma. I would have understood. She shrugged, wrapping another book with careful precision. I wanted to. Besides, Mom doesn't really need help. She just wanted to talk about some fundraiser she's planning and thought I might volunteer. Emma made a face. Stuffing envelopes is not how I want to spend my weekend. Fundraisers can be important work, I pointed out, ever mindful of not undermining Victoria in her daughter's eyes. I know, Emma conceded. But Mom only involves me when she wants to show off to her friends that her daughter is at Oakwood Heights Community College. It's all about appearances. The assessment was sharper than I expected from Emma, who typically maintained a diplomatic front regarding her mother's motivations. That seems a bit harsh, I suggested gently. Emma sighed, securing the box with tape before reaching for an empty one. Maybe? But I'm old enough now to see patterns, Grandma. How Mom presents herself to different people, how she values things based on how they reflect on her. She glanced toward the door, lowering her voice slightly. The way she treated you all these years, it wasn't right. And now that you're suddenly financially independent, she's changing her approach. It's also calculated. I didn't immediately disagree, struck by Emma's perceptiveness. My granddaughter had always been observant, but her time away at college seemed to have sharpened her ability to analyze family dynamics with uncomfortable accuracy. People are complex, I said finally. We all have our inconsistencies, our moments of pettiness alongside our capacity for generosity. Your mother included. Emma nodded, accepting this nuanced view. I know, and I do love her, obviously. She trailed off, focusing intently on folding a sweater. I don't want to be like that. I don't want to treat people differently based on what they can do for me, or what they own, or how they make me look to others. I don't think you ever could be, I assured her, touched by her concern. You have too much of your grandfather. In you, his integrity, his ability to see people for who they truly are. This seemed to comfort her, and we continued our work in companionable silence for a while. As the afternoon light began to fade, turning the room golden with approaching evening, we had nearly finished the packing. Only a few personal items remained out, things I would need over the next day or two before the move. Emma's phone chimed with a text message. She checked it quickly, then grimaced. Dad says dinner's almost ready and Mom is expecting me to join them. She looked at me apologetically. I should probably go, but I can come back afterward if you need more help. We've done the bulk of it, I assured her. Go have dinner with your parents. I'm planning an early night anyway. It's been quite a day. She hugged me tightly before leaving, whispering, I can't wait to see your new place, Grandma. It's going to be amazing. After Emma left, I surveyed the neatly packed boxes stacked against the wall. My entire life in this house, 5 years of experiences, memories, possessions, reduced to a half-dozen cardboard containers. There was something both melancholy and liberating about the sight. I decided to take a walk before dinner, needing fresh air and movement after hours of packing. The evening was mild, the neighborhood quiet as residents retreated indoors for their evening routines. I followed the familiar path through the development, noting details I had walked past hundreds of times. The crooked mailbox at number 47, the elaborate bird feeder installation at the Johnson's house, the crack in the sidewalk that bloomed with persistent dandelions each spring. Soon, this would no longer be my daily landscape. I would learn new routes, notice different details, establish fresh patterns in a home that truly belonged to me. The thought was exhilarating rather than frightening. A new chapter opening just when I had assumed the narrative of my life was winding down. I returned to the house as dusk settled over Cedar Avenue. Through the dining room windows, I could see James, Victoria, and Emma seated around the table, engaged in what appeared to be polite conversation. None of them noticed me passing by outside, a momentary observer of the family tableau from which I had been so often excluded. Rather than entering through the front door and disrupting their meal, I circled to the side entrance that led directly to my room. Inside, I prepared a simple sandwich from supplies I had set aside earlier, content with this quiet meal alone. Tomorrow would bring more packing, more paperwork, more preparation for Saturday's move. But tonight, I allowed myself to simply be still, to absorb the magnitude of the changes unfolding in my life. As I was finishing my modest dinner, a soft knock sounded at my door. Expecting Emma, I called, "Come in." To my surprise, it was Michael who entered, looking slightly uncomfortable. "Hey, Grandma, brought you some dessert." He held out a small plate with a slice of what appeared to be Victoria's signature lemon tart. "Mom said you weren't feeling well enough to join us for dinner." I accepted the plate with a smile, noting Victoria's creative interpretation of my absence. "That was thoughtful of you to bring this. How was dinner?" Michael shrugged, shoving his hands in his pockets. "Fine. Kinda tense, though. Mom and Dad kept having those weird conversations where they're saying one thing, but meaning something else." I nodded, familiar with the coded communications that often characterized James and Victoria's interactions during times of disagreement. Adult relationships can be complicated sometimes. "Yeah, I guess." Michael hesitated, then blurted, "Are you really moving this weekend? Like, for real?" "For real," I confirmed. "The movers are coming Saturday morning." He nodded slowly, processing this information. "Cool. I mean, not cool that you're leaving, but cool that you have your own place now." A pause, then. "Can I come visit?" The simple question warmed my heart. "Of course you can, Michael. Anytime. You'll have a key, just like Emma." This seemed to surprise and please him. "Really? My own key?" "Absolutely," I assured him. "The condo has a guest room that you and Emma can use whenever you want. You can come for dinners, or to study, or just to visit. Whatever you'd like." Michael's expression brightened noticeably. "That's awesome, Grandma. I was worried." He trailed off, looking slightly embarrassed. "Worried about what?" I gently prompted. He shrugged again, a habitual gesture when discussing emotional topics. "I don't know. That things would be weird after you moved out. That we wouldn't see you as much." "Michael," I said earnestly, "moving to my own place doesn't mean I'm moving away from you or Emma. If anything, I hope we'll have more quality time together, on our own terms, in a space where you're always welcome." This seemed to reassure him. "Yeah, that makes sense." He glanced at the boxes stacked nearby. "Need any help finishing up?" "Emma and I managed most of it this afternoon," I told him. "But thank you for offering. That was very thoughtful." He lingered a moment longer, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, clearly wanting to say something more. "Those pearls look nice on you," he finally offered, gesturing vaguely toward my neck. "They match your eyes." The observation, so unexpected from a teenage boy, touched me deeply. "Thank you, Michael. They belong to your great-grandmother." "Cool," he said again, apparently having exhausted his vocabulary for emotional moments. "Well, I should probably get back. Got homework and stuff." "Of course," I replied, recognizing his need for a graceful exit. "Thank you for the dessert." "And Michael?" I added as he turned to leave. "I'm very proud of the young man you're becoming." A flush crept up his neck, but he smiled, clearly pleased. "Thanks, Grandma. Night." After he left, I savored the lemon tart, appreciating the irony that Victoria had sent me a dessert while simultaneously explaining my absence as being unwell. The gesture contained layers of meaning, an olive branch perhaps, or simply a performance of proper hospitality for the children's benefit. As the evening deepened toward night, I prepared for bed, removing the pearls and placing them carefully in their velvet pouch. Tomorrow would bring another day of transition. Another step toward my new life. The pearls would come with me, a tangible connection to Richard and the life we had shared, but also a symbol of my reclaimed independence. I fell asleep easily that night, no longer troubled by the uncertainties that had plagued me for years. In my dreams, I walked through the rooms of my new condo, each space filled with light and possibility. Richard was there too, not as a ghost or a visitation, but as a presence woven into the fabric of the home we had both, in different ways, created for me. Morning arrived with pale sunlight filtering through the curtains and the distant sounds of the household stirring to life. I rose early, eager to continue the preparations for my move. After dressing, I retrieved the pearls from their pouch and fastened them around my neck once more, drawing strength from their familiar weight. When I emerged from my room, the house was quiet despite the hour. James typically left early for the office, and Victoria had a standing breakfast meeting with her interior design clients on Fridays. The kitchen was empty, a half-empty pot of coffee the only evidence that anyone had been there. I poured myself a cup, appreciating the rare opportunity to enjoy the morning in solitude. Through the kitchen window, I could see the garden Victoria maintained with meticulous precision. Every plant placed for maximum visual impact, no bloom allowed to fade past its prime, no leaf permitted to mar the calculated perfection. In my new home, I decided, I would have plants that grew with more freedom. Perhaps a small herb garden on the balcony, lavender and rosemary and mint mingling in cheerful profusion. Window boxes with flowers chosen for their scent rather than their symmetry. Life, in all its beautiful imperfection. The sound of footsteps interrupted my musings. Victoria entered the kitchen, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, her expression betraying momentary surprise at finding me there. "Eleanor," she greeted me, her tone carefully neutral. "You're up early." "Good morning, Victoria," I replied, sipping my coffee. "Yes, I wanted to get an early start. The movers will be here tomorrow." She nodded, busying herself with filling a travel mug with the remaining coffee. "James mentioned that. The truck is scheduled for 9, I believe." "That's right." I watched as she added precisely 1 teaspoon of sugar to her coffee, stirring it with the practiced efficiency that characterized all her movements. A moment of silence stretched between us, taut with unspoken tensions. Finally, Victoria spoke again, her gaze pointedly avoiding the pearls at my neck. "I've arranged for the housekeeper to give your room a thorough cleaning after you leave. The interior designer is coming Monday to discuss converting the space to a home office." The swiftness with which she planned to erase my presence might have hurt once. Now it seemed merely predictable. "That sounds practical," I said mildly. "The light in that room is excellent for a workspace." Victoria seemed slightly taken aback by my equanimity. "Yes, it is," she agreed, securing the lid on her travel mug. "Well, I should be going. My clients are waiting." I nodded, offering no resistance to her departure. "Have a good day, Victoria." She paused at the door, turning back with an expression I couldn't quite interpret, something between frustration and reluctant respect. "Eleanor, about the pearls." "Yes?" I prompted when she didn't immediately continue. Victoria pressed her lips together, clearly struggling with whatever she had intended to say. "Nothing," she finally decided. "It doesn't matter now." After she left, I remained at the window, watching as her car backed out of the driveway and disappeared down Cedar Avenue. Whatever peace Victoria and I might eventually establish would come slowly, if at all. Too much history lay between us, too many small cruelties and calculated exclusions on her part, too much resentment and hurt on mine. Yet as I touched the pearls at my neck, I felt no bitterness toward her. Victoria was who she was, a woman who built her identity around control and appearances, who measured her worth by the perfection of her environment and the deference of those within it. Her treatment of me had been unkind, certainly, but perhaps inevitable, given who we both were. I had survived those 5 years of gradual erasure, of meals eaten alone in the kitchen while family gathered without me, of holidays where my traditions were set aside, of photos where my presence was cropped out. More than survived, I emerged with a clearer sense of my own worth, no longer dependent on others' validation or approval. Richard's final gift had not been simply financial security or even the physical freedom of my own home. It had been the opportunity to reclaim myself, to remember the woman I had been before grief and dependence had diminished me. The Eleanor who ate alone in the kitchen had been a shadow of myself, accommodating to the point of invisibility, grateful for scraps of inclusion, afraid to assert my own needs or desires. That Eleanor was gone now, transformed not by Richard's money, but by my own determination to live authentically for whatever years remained to me. The pearls around my neck were more than jewelry, more than a connection to the past. They were a talisman for this new chapter, a reminder that I was worthy of beauty, of value, of place. Tomorrow the movers would come. Tomorrow I would leave this house where I had been gradually diminished, gradually erased. Tomorrow my new life would truly begin. In a home of my own, on terms of my own choosing, with the freedom to be fully myself once more. For now, though, there was work to be done, final items to pack, arrangements to confirm, a lifetime of subtle accommodation to gently but firmly set aside. I finished my coffee, rinsed the cup, and returned to my room, ready to complete the transition from unwelcome guest to woman of independent means. The pearls gleamed softly in the morning light, and I touched them once more with quiet reverence. "Thank you, Richard," I whispered to the empty room, "for this final freedom, for believing I deserved it all along." Saturday morning dawned, clear and bright, sunlight streaming through the windows as if nature itself was celebrating this day of transition. I had slept surprisingly well, waking before my alarm with a sense of anticipation rather than anxiety. Today, everything would change. I dressed with care, choosing comfortable clothes suitable for the move, but taking extra time with my appearance. The pearls, of course, were the final touch, their cool weight against my skin a constant reminder of Richard's enduring care. The movers arrived precisely at 9, efficient men in uniforms who treated my modest collection of boxes with surprising respect. James appeared shortly after, dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, offering to help supervise the loading. "Everything ready, Mom?" he asked, his tone somewhere between supportive and uncertain. "All set," I confirmed, gesturing to the neatly labeled boxes. "They've already been to the storage unit for the furniture." The actual process of loading took less than 30 minutes, a strangely brief time to pack up 5 years of life in this house. As the last box was carried out, I stood in the center of the room that had been mine, now stripped of any evidence of my presence. The generic landscape painting still hung on the wall, the curtains Victoria had selected still framed the window, but nothing of Eleanor Patterson remained. Victoria appeared in the doorway, Emma hovering uncertainly behind her. "The movers said they're finished," Victoria announced, her gaze sweeping the empty room with poorly disguised satisfaction. "Yes," I agreed simply. "That's everything." An awkward silence fell, none of us quite sure how to mark this moment of departure. Finally, Emma pushed past her mother and wrapped me in a fierce hug. "I'll come over tomorrow to help you unpack," she promised. "We can have lunch at that cafe across from the park." "I'd like that," I told her, returning the embrace. Michael appeared next, hands shoved in his pockets in typical teenage fashion. "The truck's all loaded, Grandma. The guys said they're ready when you are." I nodded, suddenly feeling the weight of the moment. This house, for all its complications and tensions, had been my home for 5 years. Leaving it represented more than a change of address. It was the final severance from the life I had shared with Richard, the closing of a chapter that had begun when he died. James stepped forward, his expression softening. "Let me drive you to the condo, Mom. The movers can follow us." "Thank you," I accepted, grateful for this small kindness. "I'd appreciate that." Victoria remained in the doorway, her posture stiff but her expression less hostile than I had expected. "Well," she said after a moment, "I hope you'll be comfortable in your new place, Eleanor." It wasn't quite well-wishing, but it wasn't a dismissal either. I chose to receive it as the closest thing to a blessing Victoria could offer. "Thank you, Victoria. I believe I will be." As I moved toward the door, Michael suddenly spoke up. "Wait, shouldn't we take a picture or something? You know, to mark the occasion?" The suggestion caught everyone by surprise. Victoria looked ready to object, but Emma quickly chimed in. "Great idea, Michael. Let's all get in the entryway. I'll use the timer on my phone." Before Victoria could formulate a protest, we were arranged in the foyer, James and Michael on either side of me, Emma setting up her phone on a side table before darting back to join us. Victoria hesitated, then reluctantly stepped into the frame, maintaining a careful distance. "Everyone say, 'New beginnings,'" Emma called as the timer counted down. The phrase hung in the air as the camera flashed, capturing an image of a family in transition. Not perfect, not entirely whole, but together in this moment of change. Outside, the spring day continued to unfold in brilliant clarity, flowers nodding in Victoria's perfect garden, birds calling from the manicured trees. I paused on the front step, breathing deeply, allowing myself one final look at the house on Cedar Avenue. "Ready, Mom?" James asked gently from beside me. I touched the pearls at my neck, drawing strength from their presence. "Yes," I said, with a smile that felt both ending and beginning. "I'm ready now." As James's car pulled away from the curb, I didn't look back. Ahead lay the park view, with its park views and city lights, its empty rooms waiting to be filled with my choices, my possessions, my life. Ahead lay afternoons with Emma learning to knit, evenings with Michael sharing music or games, friendships to cultivate, perhaps even new traditions to establish. Ahead lay the rest of my life, not as someone's mother-in-law relegated to the kitchen during family meals, not as a tolerated presence in someone else's perfectly arranged home, but as Eleanor Patterson, woman of independent means and undiminished spirit. The pearls gleamed in the spring sunshine, and I smiled, feeling Richard's presence not as a ghost or memory, but as the foundation that had made this new freedom possible. This next chapter was mine to write, one pearl, one day, one choice at a time. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.